Selena popped on and said happy birthday.
Hey.
She's one of
Which
my
one? Wait a minute.
students on YouTube. She's
This
one of
one?
my students.
Thank you, ma'am.
This is YouTube. This is Instagram.
See, look, see?
Babe. Y'all. How's y'all doing?
She's, oh, wow, Amber said I have a little boyfriend. Yeah, okay.
Wait for a few more minutes for people to come on.
Keep playing. A couple years, they're going to be like, we'll get on when your husband's in the background.
Whatever.
So are you supposed to wash this, then spray the stuff on there, or spray the stuff on?
Spray stuff on there. Hi, everyone. Zelina said today, let him get all his shine. It's his birthday.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Man, see, Selena is a friend. Miss McBride. People don't forget how you treat me.
If you don't.
So you know what? You should kick off your intro video on Father's Day. That way, you know. You could probably get some men candle makers to jump in.
What? Yeah, there's some men candle makers out here. All right, y'all. This is another impromptu live. Like every day, I'm challenging myself to go live and just talk something about candle making, or just teach a little something, or just interact with you all a little more. So today I want to just really quick talk about finding your fill line. I get a lot of questions about how to find your fill line, especially if it's not super obvious. And so I'm just going to talk a few tips with you all today. Tip number one to find, well, first let me show you a comparison. So here are my old jars. They're one of my candles. Here's one of my old jars. So you can see here, and I'll show Instagram in a minute. So this fill line, this is the fill line right here. Quite obvious, right? That crevice tells me that is the 7-ounce mark. This is a 9-ounce jar, but the fill line here tells me that this is the 7-ounce mark. Oh, let me show Instagram. So I was showing YouTube, this is the fill line right here. There's a crevice here that lets me know where to fill it at. So this is an obvious fill line, right? But not all jars are made this way. So when you have a jar such as my new jars that I'm testing out, where it's just a jar, there's no fill line, there's no indicator, like no obvious indicator. So a couple tips. Tip number one, whoever you buy your candle jars from, whatever supplier, I always recommend contacting them. So if they do not have, well, first look at the product description. Look at the jar description where you purchase it. And if it does not say anything to indicate how much, what size jar it is, and then how much wax it can hold, then I would, let's do process of elimination. So if it at least tells you, oh, this is a 9-ounce jar, if it at least tells you that, but it does not let you know the net weight, then that's when you can begin to kind of do like the law of averages or process of elimination. So a 9-ounce jar typically holds 7 ounces net weight of wax. There are a lot of guides, jar guides, wax guides, and stuff like that are on suppliers' website. But if you cannot find anything like that, I would contact the supplier first off and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this particular jar. Can you tell me, or do you know how much wax it holds? And they should be able to tell you. Oh, that net weight's about, say, it can hold up to 7 ounces of wax. Cool. And then you got it. So then what you do when you go home and you make a bunch of wax and you're batching out candles, such as myself, like yesterday when I went live, I was batching out, I made 9 candles just for my product photography. And so I knew that this jar holds 7 ounces. So what you do is you grab your scale, and each time you go to pour your jar, you sit your jar on the scale and you tear it to 0. And I pour until I get to 198 grams, which is 7 ounces of wax. And so that's kind of the first thing. So you can ask the supplier, hey, what is this jar net weight? How much wax can it hold? And they should be able to tell you. If they tell you, come home, and that's how much you'll pour in each jar. So you'll pour it, sit that over, get the next jar, pour it, and do the same thing until you filled all your jars. That's exactly how I did it yesterday when I did my 9 jars. I just took 1 jar at a time and poured 198 grams. Now, if the supplier, if you don't have much luck with the supplier and they don't tell you, this is where I encourage candle makers to go home and just do trial and error. And again, you can even Google, like, on average or an estimated, what does a 9 ounce jar net weight, for candles? You can do research and find out. But typically, you'll just have to do trial and error and see how much it can hold comfortably with the wick trimmed as well. And so let's say you have a 10 ounce jar and you're trying to find out how much it holds and you don't have any indicator and the supplier was unable, and the Shelly is the type of, you said you keep seeking help. Can I put a coat on the top or redo it again? I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean like you're getting sinkholes and pour wax on top of it to smooth it out? Is that what you're talking about? I'm not sure what you're talking about. But trial and error. So if you take your jars home and again, you have no indication from the supplier or anything, that's where you do trial and error. So let's say you have a 10 ounce jar. I would just start working my way up in ounces. So maybe start with pouring 8 ounces, maybe pour 8.5 ounces and test and see, trim the wick and see, if it fits right comfortably with the lid on. There, when it comes to candle making, my point is, it's a lot of trial and error that you're going to have to find out. Sometimes jars don't come with any information, especially if you buy jars from like the dollar store or Walmart or something like that, where you're just kind of playing around and testing. Those are the jars where you're going to have to kind of play trial and error and just kind of find out. But if on average, like a 10 ounce jar typically holds 8.5 ounces, then start from there and do process of elimination. Okay, so Shelly is the topic. So yes, if you have sinkholes, you can pour a coat of wax over top of it and it will cure and smooth the top out. Or you can just use a heat gun and smooth it out yourself with sinkholes, which is what I was actually doing a little bit today. I had 2 of them that needed a little help. So I was doing that earlier today. So tip number 1, contact the supplier where you buy your jars from. Hey, I do not see on your product description exactly how much wax it holds comfortably with the wick and with a lid on. Can you help me figure out the net weight? They should be able to tell you. Tip number 2, if they cannot tell you and you're unsure, then go home and play trial and error and Google how much wax typically a 10 ounce jar will net weight. How much wax will typically a 12 ounce jar will net weight. I actually plan on making a guide as a freebie. It's coming really soon. I'm waiting on my graphic designer to finish designing it and getting it all ready for the headquarters, LadyC's Digital HQ. So I am making a jar guide that will kind of list on average the most common size candle jars and then the common net weights that go with that particular size to kind of help give you all a foundation on where to start. But those are the 2 tips that I recommend. And then when you're pouring, literally put the candle on the scale. And once you find out how much it net weights, that's how much you pour in each candle. Let me see. Okay, so I answered her question. Can you exceed the recommended wax capacity? You can if you don't plan on using a lid. I think Chaotic Beauty. If you don't plan on using a lid, then you can do that. And a lot of people use like dust covers instead of lids, and you can fill it all the way up to the capacity if you like. But when it comes to net weight, like it has to be able to clip the wick and fit. The lid has to be able to fit comfortably so your wick isn't bending when the top is on. So that's why there's a net weight with candles. It gives you a limit on how much your wick should be able to fit comfortably. What should you do if the supplier tells you to use a certain wick, but it doesn't work at all? You went up and down, but it just doesn't work. You can try a different brand instead of the same wick series and you're going up and down. Maybe just try a completely different brand in general. Like when I first started, I was recommended Eco Wicks, and Eco Wicks was horrible with my 464. I didn't really like them. I didn't like the way they burned. They burned black, and I was just not feeling it. And so I switched to a CD. I switched to another series. I just went on Candle Science. I was like, oh, what other series do they have? And I literally just bought the CD series off a whim. And I said, okay, well, if I use the Eco, I think it was like an Eco 10 or something like that with my 9 ounce, an Eco 10 or an Eco 14. And then I asked the supplier, what's like a backup recommendation that you have? And they said, oh, well, you can try the CD. And I wanted to try the CD wicks, and I asked the supplier which CD wick size go with that jar. And they was like, oh, a CD 12. So I purchased the CD 12 and started testing with that with my 464 with these 9 ounce straight sided jars, and it worked fine. So you can try a completely different brand or a completely different wick series if that's the case, because that's what I did. I didn't like the Eco wicks. That was just my opinion. So Shelly is a topic. Okay, so yes, you can pour another coating of wax over top. If you're getting sinkholes, you can either pour a little bit of wax over top to coat it, or you can use a heat gun to fix it and just smooth out the tops that way. But I prefer the heat gun because sometimes pouring a coat of wax over top of it, it kind of masks the scent, like the initial whiff that you get right on top. If you remelt a little bit of wax, I mean, you're more than welcome to add fragrance oil to it, but I don't really like messing up my formula. Like I have my formula down packed, so I don't really like adding a little bit more wax or a little bit more fragrance oil because that's getting a little too difficult to measure, and I don't want to waste any wax. Like, oh well, let me just melt another 5 ounces of wax and see if that covers the top, and then I'm going to have to figure out how much fragrance oil corresponds with that. So I just like using a heat gun because it doesn't mess with the scent or anything. It just keeps your formula is still in there. So I prefer to use a heat gun to fix my sinkholes. I've tried coating it with a new pour of wax. I've done that before, and then literally I would go like this and I couldn't smell a thing. So I don't really like that method, but it does work. You can use that. Yeah, it actually works better than a heat gun. Because you're constantly like doing this, but I just don't like the fact that it covers and kind of like disintegrates my smell. Oh, I want to be able to I already know. I see what that smells like. So that is it. I just wanted to give you those couple tips. I get a lot of questions on, I cannot figure out this fill line stuff, especially when it's not obvious, like this type of jar. So these are my old jars, like I said earlier, if you're just tuning in. And so you can see the obvious fill line here. It's really obvious. But my new jars do not have that. It's just a jar. And so I went on the website when I purchased it. It said it was a 9 ounce jar. So because I know 9 ounces typically net weights about 7 ounces, I went with 7 ounces. And that's and it works out fine. I trim the wick and the lid. Actually, let me get one with the lid on it. So here it is with the lid. So it's just right. Like, I like the 7-ounce pour. I could actually pour a little higher, and there's the wick is trimmed. I could pour a little higher, but I actually like it just like that. So that's what the net weight is for. It's to make sure that you have enough room with your wick trimmed to be able to put a lid on it as well. All right. Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you all today, to give you a few tips about that. Again, I'll be randomly going live all month, dropping little nuggets and little gems about candle making. So just continue to tune in. I do my best to post on my stories like, hey, going live at 3 or going live at 12:30. So just try to stay tuned as much as you can. And again, I'll be coming on here just talking, just helping out with candle questions or tips or what have you. So that's all I wanted to talk to y'all about today. So I hope y'all having a great Tuesday, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.